So now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to be speaking about recycling and composting facilities and operations. So I've talked about some of the definitions and thresholds and that sort of thing in prior workshop presentations, webinars, and that kind of thing. But these are entities who do recycling or composting as defined in our Article 9.25, Section 18815.2 CCR, and they meet or exceed the de minimis tonnage threshold of 100 tons per quarter for material sold or transferred. Recycler composters, very importantly, do not report on what they receive, only what they send out. So our requirements for them are fairly straightforward, and we'll cover what to keep track of for each outflow sent to either reporting entities, end users, or persons outside the state. So there's some different requirements for each of those here. Taking a look at what we have on the screen, the diagram here, Jackie's Recyclery. We talked about, we registered them in RDRS as the April 17th webinar as a recycler/composter. That's corresponds to recycling and composting facilities and operations. The reporting requirements for those entities can be found in Section 18815.7 of Article 9.25. So basically, again, we're only reporting outflows, and we're doing so mostly by material type. So jurisdiction of origin is something that's never a requirement to keep track of for recycler/composters. And we'll talk about, residuals and attributing them and so forth. And folks may want to interrupt me with some questions about that, and that's fine. So solid waste disposal. Let's say you, as a result of your recycling process, there's some shrinkage or residuals that are generated as a result of the activities. Contamination is removed from the system. And the materials are cleaned, and in doing so, and processed, and in doing so, there's some amount of, some nominal amount of waste that's generated. So how do you account for that? Well, you would identify the receiving facility for which you're sending that stream solid waste disposal. So a disposal facility or transfer processing facility, most likely. You would identify the tons and the material type. So that's one distinction that I want to make clear for recycling composting facilities. When you send solid waste to disposal, it's you don't simply characterize it as solid waste. You would characterize it at the level of handling. So it may be the case that it's if you bailed up PET bottles, and this is sort of a kind of a nightmare scenario, but you bailed up PET bottles and you couldn't find. Well, let's pick on. Now let's just stick with PET bottles. You bailed up PET bottles, and let's just say you didn't do a great job of it, and there's contamination in the bales, and no one wants to buy it from you, and your only recourse is to dispose it. So you would indicate that you sent X tons of PET bottles to solid waste disposal. So that's a requirement specifically pertaining to recycling, composting facilities and operations, that you are required to characterize the solid waste outflow at the level of handling. Now, if to you, it's solid waste, and that's how you sent it off, or mixed recyclables, or residuals, or however you want to characterize it. If that's how you send it out, you would simply say that. So hopefully that makes sense to folks. Now, recycling, composting facilities and operations can also send out streams of green material potential beneficial reuse. Now, you would keep track of that as well by material type, and if the jurisdiction essentially would be the facility in which this reporting entity is located. So let's say you take in a load of green material potential beneficial reuse to a landfill. They ask you where it's coming from. You would identify the location of the facility, the recycling/composting facility, as usual, and proceed along your merry way with the green material potential beneficial reuse. Looking at outflows of non-green material potential beneficial reuse, so one below that, you reporting the tons of each material type of non-green material potential beneficial reuse sent to each reporting entity. So if you sent it to 3 landfills, so if you sent 3 things to 3 landfills, you would end up reporting 9 data points on that. All right, recycling, composting, that's one below. So for, let's say, let's say you're sending material to another recycling or composter for further processing. You would indicate the tons of material type, tons by material type sent to each facility, and provide that contact information, RDRS number, as appropriate. So if you send material for brokering, transporting, so one below that, so this is to entities and who then take basically control or possession of the material, and then determine the destination for the sale or transfer. You would just indicate the broker or transporter to which you sent that material for brokering, transporting. And then if you sent to an end user in state, you would report the tons, material type, end user category by region, similar to other reporting for end users. So that essentially covers the requirements and how to keep track of certain required information to be reported pursuant to RDRS. And this would be on a quarterly basis, again, for each stream and each facility. So hopefully that makes sense for folks here. Okay, now looking at out-of-state flows. Essentially everything is the same again, except for outflows to recycle or composter. Out of state, you would not be required to identify the contact information or the of the out-of-state recycling composting facility or operation. Everything else that I just covered for in-state also pertains to out-of-state as well. All right. So, any questions on this so far? Okay, that essentially, that'll do it for recycling and composting facilities. Of course, wastewater treatment plants are included in the regulations as recycling and composting facilities and operations. So I just wanted to throw that little tidbit out there as well for folks, if that's helpful. All right. Oh, wow, I can move this too.